we haven't had that much to talk about other than spring football and kind of, the takeaways from the spring game. Now there's so much with the transfer portal, and I want to kind of start out on a couple points talking about the transfer portal additions under Coach Kalen DeBoer. But first, please congratulate Nick Kelly. He's recently married, so give us a short capsule, man. The wedding, was it an amazing experience? How you feeling now that you're a married man? Because it gives you a lot of momentum in terms of life. This is a whole new beginning. So congratulations, and quickly tell us, did you have the most amazing day?
Yeah, well, thank you first off. And no, it was incredible. Just so grateful for all the people that celebrated us and just the time that they took to be with us, and just so grateful for my now wife, Elizabeth, who's just a lovely person. And it's just been so fun to, step in this new chapter. It's kind of a crazy new chapter for Alabama football, also a new chapter for my life, and just super grateful for everything and feeling blessed, and just kind of excited to venture into the offseason more, and grateful for all that's been going on. And just, it's been a crazy year. I mean, between Nick Saban retiring and the Final Four run covering that, there's been not much of a chance to take a breath, and finally getting a chance to do that now. So trying to take that deep inhale before the exhale that is the football season, which it feels like it's a ways away, but it's going to be here before we know it.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you on something that I know is close to you, and that is Cecil Hurt. Because, as you were growing into your profession, and we still all are, I mean, there's never going to be an icon, someone as impactful as Cecil was. When you were kind of earning your stripes, what are some things that that you took away that you could from Cecil? Maybe a couple elements that you still try to model your game, if you can, in terms of writing from someone who's just absolutely legendary.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you don't try to imitate too much, just because you kind of have to be yourself. I mean, you know that as a content creator, as a broadcaster, whatever it might be, you learn from other people, but you don't necessarily try to mimic directly, because if you do, it can come off as fake. I mean, you want to be genuine. And that's the thing about Cecil. He was genuine. He was a big guy in terms of authenticity. He really believed in just being yourself. And I think he appreciated authenticity, whether it be for food, the profession. I mean, you were around him too, but just kind of what he was all about to an extent as well. And authenticity was his biggest thing. And also one thing he mentioned was, everyone you encounter, they know more than you do, kind of thing. And part of that was everyone thinks they know more than maybe they do about Alabama football or basketball or whatever it might be. But also I think there's a respect in that, and just his approach to that. So those are some of the bigger things I took from him. But phenomenal writer. I love reading his stuff. And so that was something for me that it was just a treat to be able to see just kind of how he operated and how he treated people.
We've had a lot of time now to kind of digest the transfers that have been in. Not a lot of time, but we've had some time to understand the transfers that are coming in from the transfer portal. If we can quickly just encapsulate, the guys that are coming in. And I always ask the undefeated is the community that we have on here. They know we like, if you have something, they will quickly find this out for you. But I like to talk like most impactful. And I think, we've kind of came to a consensus within our community that Kane Proctor, like you said, sorta at Iowa, coming back, that's gigantic for Alabama. I like Graham Nicholson. Just who do you think will be some impactful transfers under this spring window that Coach Kalen DeBoer has brought in that will certainly fill needs for this roster?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with those two, because I think they are highest on that list. They needed an offensive lineman, at least one. They got two. And they got a guy who is a blue chip kind of guy in Caden Proctor. Still room to improve in his game, but I think a lot of people all last year, even when he was struggling, were excited to see what he could do long term. So when he left, it was kind of this disappointment of, man, it would have been great to see what he could do when he has a full offseason in the weight and strength and conditioning program, and when he has a chance to get a season under his belt. So he's a guy who can be super talented, has incredible capabilities, just continuing to help him realize that. And that's what this staff will have to help him do, because he's going to be coming in without having spent the spring with Alabama. So it's going to be really key for him to get in. But I think he's a high-impact guy just because they need guys on the offensive line who have experience, especially tackle. Graham Nicholson, as far as a kicker, they needed a guy. Kalen DeBoer said there was open competition, which is not a ringing endorsement of maybe a Connor Tulty. So it was key to bring in a guy. And they not only bring in a guy, they bring in a guy who won the award for top kicker in the nation a season ago. I mean, it's so wild to think about. They go from having Will Reichert, the NCAA's all-time leading point scorer, a very accurate kicker, a guy that Nick Saban loved, to then getting the one guy who beat him out for the Grozo Award. So, I mean, you couldn't ask for a much better situation at kicker than what Alabama has and what they were able to pick up in the transfer portal. So those are two high-impact guys. But you also look in the secondary because they lost a ton of guys. I believe 10 was the number in the portal, and that doesn't even include the NFL draft. So they needed to get guys, and it wasn't necessarily going to be a one-for-one. Okay, you lose Terry and Arnold, who was one of the best defensive backs in the country. You get another guy like that, but they brought in Damani Jackson. They bring in a Keon Sabb. They bring in a Deshaun Jones. Like, I mean, you have guys who have experience, not necessarily on that level, but just in terms of impact. I mean, they need these guys to step in and play well. So those are some of the biggest names for me that I'm watching, and I think have the biggest chance to have an impact just based on what Alabama needs for snaps.
Here with Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News. Please follow him on social media. Check out the Tuscaloosa News. They have some great stuff. Do a great job on social media, by the way. I love following you during this springtime. Great job, especially covering, the coach Kalen DeBoer and the whole, crazy coaching transition. We've had a unique opportunity over the last, 120 days to be able to speak to assistant coaches, which wasn't the case in the past. We've had, you could talk to like them during bowl games, the deal, but never in this sort of capacity. Getting an opportunity for me to talk to the assistant coaches, I think was interesting because you get to see just how talented the assistant coaches are. For example, like Mo Lindquist, Kane Womack, like these guys were just head football coaches, and now they are working with the University of Alabama as position coaches, elevating the overall roster. What has it been for you as a reporter to get to talk to assistant coaches and kind of see this new energy that people speak about, but also kind of the intelligence and the overall just kind of the climate of the attitude of some of these assistant coaches?
Yeah, I think it's refreshing, first off, just because you get multiple personalities. You get to talk to different types of people. I mean, for me, I just like talking to people in general. And I think it's so fun when you can get different just football guys talking about the sport, talking about their players. And it's nothing personal against the head coach because they can be great as well, but it's more just you get to talk to different personalities. So if you want a perspective on the running game, you can go talk to Robert Gillespie and because he's directly in that room. He's constantly talking to those people. And I get the strategy Nick Saban deployed, but at the same time, for me as a reporter, selfishly, it's just fun to talk to some of these people. I mean, for me, assistant coaches are some of the more fun people to talk to because a lot of them are just about ball. They just want to talk about football. They want to talk about basketball, whatever sport you're covering. Those assistant coaches are less CEO and more just, hey, I just want to talk about my guys, talk about the sport. So I really enjoy it. I think it's a fresh perspective. And that was the case when I covered Missouri too. Like assistant coaches were some of the best quotes and some of the best interviews. So I'm really excited.
I wanted to ask you, Nick, I think we still have Nick. Still there, Nick? Let's see if you can get back on.
You still got me?
Yeah, I think I still got you. Okay, there we go. Something that we talk about, and everybody has a difference of opinion, and it's a very hot topic all the time about Jalen Milroe returning. It's a polarizing topic. The quarterback position clearly is going to always be polarizing. In this particular case, my argument about Jalen Milroe, and some of the points that I like to point out is he had Bill O'Brien, who didn't even want him, according to Jalen Milroe, as a quarterback. And then he had Tommy Rees. And in my opinion, I felt the stage was a little bit too big for Tommy Rees at that point in time. Then you had Ryan Grubb for 10 days or whatever that was. And now you have Nick Sheridan. And from listening to Jalen Milroe himself, he seems to already have a really good continuity with Sheridan, with Coach Kalen DeBoer, and this whole new system. At a glance, when you kind of zoom out and talk about Jalen Milroe, how much impact do you think him having several different offensive coordinators, has impacted his game, or maybe he's still on track? Like, kind of what's your take from having so many different coaches during the short time that he's been here?
Yeah, I think continuity is a good thing when you can have it, and he hasn't had it. I mean, he's like you said, he's had multiple guys, and Doesn't mean you can't thrive. Doesn't mean you can't do well. But even just think about yourself or about anyone who, say you're in a job and every year you have a new boss. That's not the easiest thing to navigate. It helps when you have continuity. So I think that granted, he's not necessarily going to have that, because if he has a good year, he'll probably go to the NFL. But yeah, I think that would have to mess with the guy, and especially now that he has to learn a new system and have to learn some new concepts. That's a challenge. Doesn't mean you can't figure it out, but I think it does. Say if he would have had the same offensive coordinator from his start until now, same system from start until now. I mean, experience just breeds just confidence. Doesn't mean you can't be confident, but that's just a much easier way to that. And so that's something he's had to battle, and a lot of these guys on the offense have had to battle.
Yeah, I just want to get your take on that, because when you kind of zoom out and you look to the offensive coaches that everybody has had to adapt to, specifically the quarterback, and I still feel that things are not the same, and they might change, but since Steve Sarkisian and AJ Milroe and Mortensen were here, I felt like those guys were like the quarterback whisperers behind the scenes that really helped. Plus you had, different sort of weapons, but that's, quarterbacks. We could talk quarterbacks. You could have your own YouTube channel talking about just quarterbacks. The defensive expectations is also something I wanted to ask you about, considering the fact that now you have, I guess, what is known as an offensive-minded coach, and you're transitioning from a defensive-minded coach and Coach Saban, who was the cornerbacks coach to me. I always saw him working with the DBs. But now you have an offensive coach. So when you look to the defense, and expectations are always so hard to talk about, but based on the knowledge that we have in terms of starters, roster, what's feasible, with this defense and, this 4-2-5, which, they played 4-2-5 before, but kind of how are you looking at the defense? And, you don't have Kevin Steele, you don't have Coach Saban, you don't have T-Rob. So a whole different mix on the defensive side.
Yeah, it's a group that to me is the biggest question mark. I mean, the offense, there's a lot to figure out too, but just because that's Kalen DeBoer's specialty, there's a proven track record. To me, I feel more confident in the offense going into the season than I am the defense. Doesn't mean that the defense won't be good. It's just more so, what is this going to look like? How good are they going to be? And really, how does this group that was tailored more for Nick Saban's defense, how does that group translate to Kane Wommack's defense? We'll see. Could be good, could be a struggle. I mean, that's just something that we're going to figure out. It's just we don't have enough evidence just yet. And part of it is you just lost a lot of guys too. I mean, this team to me doesn't necessarily have a clear cut, here's the pass rusher, here's the guy who can get after the quarterback. Like we kind of have known coming into past seasons, even though, we had questions, how would Dallas Turner be with Will Anderson gone, not taking the double teams anymore? You kind of had a pretty good idea Dallas Turner is still going to be pretty darn good.
Yeah.
What are Keanu Coote and Quandarius Robinson, guys like that, what are they going to be like at that Wolf position in terms of getting after the passer? What is that going to look like? Can they man that? Alabama's got guys with pedigree. Doesn't mean that they don't have guys. There's just not that proven, we know this guy's going to be pretty darn good. With another good season, he'll be a first-round pick kind of guy. So that I'm curious to see what the pass rush is like. How do they get after the quarterback? Also, the secondary, there's just so many questions, so much change. We touched on that a little bit before, but I mean, when you lose as many talented guys as they have, and Alabama's not unfamiliar with that. It happens all the time. But this secondary, just a total revamp. You had all those guys leave, completely different group. How do they mesh together? Who plays where? Who fits best where? Just a lot of questions. So to me, the defense could be good, could be a really strong suit. I don't think Kane Wommack has been able to work with this kind of talent before. So it's going to be fun to see what he can do with that. But still a lot of question marks just because it is a new defense and it is a new group of talent working together.
This front-end schedule for Alabama, I think it was yesterday, it came out that Alabama will be hosting Western Kentucky at 6 p.m. Kind of an interesting storyline is they have TJ Finley. I think Alabama faced them before, if I'm not mistaken, when he was – seems like he's been around for a long time. That game's at 6 on ESPN. Still no time on South Florida. We all went to that game last year. That game was just – it was so strange with the rain, and there's a lot to dive into that game. Wisconsin on the road, Madison at 11 a.m., everyone's favorite time for a football game, and then 6:30 for Georgia. So when you look to this front-end schedule, then you have Vanderbilt and, of course, South Carolina. When you look to this front-end schedule, clearly the high point in everybody. The first game for Alabama to everybody is Georgia. But, before that, you have Western Kentucky, you have South Florida. What's kind of your general viewpoint of Alabama's front end schedule?
It's really intriguing. I think the first two games, nice way to get things warmed up. Western Kentucky is an interesting team. They've had some success, but coming to Bryant-Denny Stadium to play Alabama for the first game is not going to be an easy task, even if Nick Saban's no longer the coach. So you have those kind of two games to get just some experience, some Kalen DeBoer can kind of get rolling with the squad. But then you start kind of this gauntlet to an extent of, okay, you go to Wisconsin. Not that Wisconsin is going to be the best team they face this year, but a road trip to a place that you never really go against a team that, that place is going to be rocking. I was looking at ticket prices, and it's pretty darn high for that Alabama game. I think a lot of people are excited. That's my neck of the woods where I grew up, is the Midwest. And people, I think, are very intrigued to see Alabama playing in Wisconsin. Even if it's not Nick Saban's team, it's still Alabama.
Sure.
So should be a great environment. Camp Randall, very fun place to watch some college football. And the danger, too, about that game is you have Georgia at home the following week, as you mentioned, which is probably the preeminent game of the season for Alabama, maybe even for college football, one of the best games on the schedule, at least in this point in May. And so very easily guys could look forward to that game, could look ahead to that game and overlook a trip to Wisconsin, which, as you talked about with South Florida last year, very strange game, but when you go on the road, kind of all bets are off to an extent. So Alabama cannot afford to overlook Wisconsin and look to Georgia. So it's going to be very key to stay 1 week at a time because, that Georgia game, talk about a welcome to the SEC for Kalen DeBoer, kicking things off against Kirby Smart. At least it's at Bryant-Denny Stadium, but still a heck of a first matchup in the SEC, which is maybe nice that the SEC scheduled Vanderbilt the following week to kind of have that a little bit of a release valve, so to speak, for Kalen DeBoer and the team. But talk about a schedule to start off in those first 4 weeks. So you have a few games to get warmed up, and then you have two, I think, tough games, and Wisconsin's tough because it's on the road. So very intriguing to start, and there's no true warm-up month, if you will, for Kalen DeBoer. Maybe it's a warm-up week or two.
Here with Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News. Please follow him on social media and check out the Tuscaloosa News. And then when you look to the back-end schedule, I think it's one of the most challenging back-end schedules outside of Florida. I don't know if you've had a chance to look to Florida's schedule, but their back-end is just, it's incredible. It's the most challenging back-end period in college football. But when you look to Alabama's back-end schedule, you have games on the road against Tennessee, LSU. You play Missouri at home. Then you go to Oklahoma, and then you turn around and you prepare for Hugh Freeze in your rivalry game. So that back end schedule, and I honestly feel, this is just my opinion, that whoever wins the college football national title this year, specifically whoever wins the SEC championship this year, you can make a play for this. Could be one of the better college football teams, just because of the gauntlet that you're going to have to go through to win the college football championship. It's not out of the realm that Alabama and Georgia could play 3 times. Think about it, right? They play at home. What if they're 1-2 in the SEC? That's twice. And then depending on this Frankenstein playoff, they could get paired where they meet again. I don't know. That would be crazy. That would be great for us.
That'd be wild. It'd be fun. Talk about some high caliber football, but that'd be something. It reminds me of the NFL, where say you'd have a rivalry game where you could play, 3 times in one season.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that, but that's the thing. I think people all season it's going to be comparing Kalen DeBoer and Nick Saban. Naturally that's where your head goes.
Yep.
But I think it's so important for people to remember that what Nick Saban accomplished, what he did over his 17 seasons at Alabama, is going to be so tough to replicate no matter who you put. Even if Kirby Smart was here right now, even if, no matter, fill in the blank coach's name, it's going to be so hard to win national titles in this new era because you have to go through a playoff to get there. You have to win. You're now in an SEC that has Oklahoma and Texas in it. The challenge of winning now is going to be so high. That level is going to be so high that to expect someone to do what Nick Saban did. To be honest with you, I don't think Nick Saban could do what he did in this era of college football, just because there's more parity. There's more just a long path to get there than there used to be. And so that's, I think, what people have to remember is if you win a national championship, like you said, Kyle, you're going to really earn it. I mean, it's coming out of the SEC, you're really going to earn that. And Big Ten too. I mean, you look at that, just that slate. So it's a whole new era, but I think it's exciting. I mean, it's different, but I personally love when there's change and you can kind of just have everything so fascinating, everything so new. Of course, some people don't like change. I don't like change in some ways, but I'm just intrigued. For me, as in my job, I'm just intrigued by it. So I think it's going to be a fun season.
Yeah, as am I. I can't wait. I mean, I can't wait. This college football season will be unlike any other season that we've seen. And I think sometimes we get in our mind, you lose one game and you're out of the, the playoffs or the 4-team or whatever it was, the BCS. No, not so much. I think you're going to have teams who lose 2 games who could possibly steal 3 games and still make the playoffs and still have a run at the national championship. This is a completely new college football world that we are now in. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, from a reporter standpoint, you've been covering the Tuscaloosa News. I got here, and the head basketball coach was Avery Johnson. And one thing that I learned living in Tuscaloosa is that, clearly football is the thing that drives the bus. But people love Alabama basketball. They want this team to be good. This team is now elite. This team now has reverse rat poison. On3 just released their preseason rankings that has Alabama number 1. They got Cliff Amore. Right Cell's coming back. We're still kind of waiting on, Mark Sears, but you got Grant Nelson coming back. I mean, this roster, Jaron Stevenson, Diabate, the roster is unbelievable. What has it been like for you as a reporter to watch what Nate Oates has done with Alabama basketball? Because it's really been phenomenal. The Alabama basketball is right here where they're at this point in time.
Yeah, I think this is a golden era. So Alabama basketball fans need to enjoy it because I think this is somewhat unprecedented for what this team. I mean, there's a legitimate chance, Kyle, that in preseason rankings, that the basketball team could be ranked higher than football. And I don't think football is going to be ranked that low. But I think it's very possible that if Alabama gets Mark Sears back, that you see them in that 1, 2, 3 spot. And Alabama might be number 5 in football. I mean, I'm just projecting here because I just don't know how the rankings are going to come out. But I mean, just even the fact that's even in the conversation is wild. And that's not a knock on football as much as it is for basketball, what the men's team has become and what Nate Oates has done. I mean, they are a contender every year. It's not just, okay, this is their special team. This is their run. This past year was maybe a quote unquote down year and they made the Final Four. I mean, that's what's wild. This roster should be better than last year's roster. And which is just so wild to think about. So this is not okay, they have a 1 year, maybe 2 year run. I mean, they are building every year. They're getting better every year. And the program becomes easier and easier to sell because what more do they have accomplished other than win a national championship? They're producing draft picks. They play a fun style. They made the Final Four. They're having postseason success. I mean, this is a group that Nate Oates is doing just about everything. And so there's a lot to like, I think, if you're a recruit right now. And if you're a fan right now, it's just a fun style of basketball, and there's a lot to enjoy.
And I think what's interesting about Nate Oates as a basketball coach is one of the signs of a really high caliber coach is when you can't get that coach to go to your program, but you start taking his assistant coaches, and to be able to think about the high quality assistant coaches that he lost this past season, and he's able to still make a run. Now, I think that this team played to their absolute potential, and we all know that they weren't that they were missing a rim protector, and Bediako left a little bit too early, but now you have Chris Amore coming in. How big of an impact was that for Alabama to get Amore, considering that he was just at North Carolina, right? He was at North Carolina, and then he committed to Alabama. I mean, North Carolina basketball, they're up there on the Mount Rushmore of basketball teams. So that's kind of where we are. I mean, what do you think, far out with Amore coming in, how big do you think that will be for Alabama basketball now that they do have their rim protector?
Yeah, I think that was the signature piece. And Nate Oates not so subtly hinted at that throughout the season that they were going to go get a rim protector. And so if they didn't get Cliff Amore, there were other guys they could have gotten after and guys that were in the mix for. But to go get Cliff, who they wanted, who was one of their top priorities, was huge. I mean, they went and got a guy who is a really solid defender, makes plays. I mean, just, again, a guy you can build around. And I think a guy you can funnel players to that will protect the rim. And so I think they're in a great spot. I mean, he's the signature piece for this offseason in terms of attaining him. And I think it could have worked out much better, frankly, for Alabama. And to your point, Kyle, I mean, they are fully in it, competing with the blue bloods of college basketball. Yeah. I mean, Alabama is, I think the phrase is new blood, right? Is what they're starting to accomplish. Yeah. And Alabama really is in just a spot where you don't have to go to a Duke or North Carolina or a Kansas necessarily. If you want to play high caliber basketball and play in a system that's going to get you the NBA, you can do that at Alabama. No, they don't have the championships in basketball that maybe some of those other programs do. But if you don't necessarily just want to be another guy at one of those programs, you can really come and create a legacy at Alabama and help Alabama reach new heights and still accomplish what you want to do. So it is wild to see Alabama beating out some of those schools, some of those teams on a consistent basis. And I think it's just, again, it's such a fun time to be an Alabama basketball fan. If you have suffered through the mediocre to bad college basketball that at times has happened in Tuscaloosa. And so I think I know a lot of Alabama basketball fans, and I'm just happy for them because a lot of them suffered and waited for this moment.
I have a few more minutes with you before we get to 9:30. Is there any movement on like this new arena? Like, is this realistic? Like, where, like, do we have any like insight on this this new arena? Like, what are we hearing on that front?
Yeah, I still think it's a long-term play kind of thing. And just right now, there's so many things in college athletics that are kind of being figured out. And we're waiting on the case right now with the NCAA and versus House and trying to figure out what that means for revenue sharing with athletes. And so I think some of those things need to get figured out. Not that that's tied directly with the arena, but it all comes together. It all contributes. And so I think it's just been something that Alabama's working toward. Greg Byrne has stressed that many times, but it's just not the same priority that right now you need NIL to compete. You need new facilities types of things. And so I think, and that's always been clear that for Nate Oates to stay, he doesn't necessarily need a new arena. He wouldn't mind it, but Nate Oates could coach a team at the local park and they'd win games. And so great to have a new arena if you can. It's just that takes time, takes serious capital. Whereas some of that more short-term NIL is needed to be able to compete at the level they want to. And Coleman, I mean, yes, could use upgrades, could be better. But Alabama's winning in Coleman. They're winning big games. They're filling out Coleman in some big games. And so it's not this, this has to happen tomorrow. We're working toward it, is my understanding, but it's just, it's just something that maybe is not going to be a tomorrow or the next day type of thing. But still, it's in the works. It's just not an immediate kind of thing.
And one of the things that fans need to realize is that Coleman Coliseum is a large arena. So if you want to get a chance to watch this great Alabama basketball team, you have an opportunity to get in there right now. But this new arena, I would imagine, is a little bit smaller because Coleman is a big place. It's a big venue. So I don't know, maybe keep that in mind. Before we let you go, Nick, what are you working on this summer? Any features, any projects? What should fans watch or be looking for on Tuscaloosa News from your sports coverage?
Yeah, I have some features in the works. And that's the great thing about this time of year is you can kind of take more of a step back and work on some of those things that aren't as much tied to a moment. So I think it's looking at a Kalen DeBoer and trying to better show who he is and what he's about. And just also looking at what Alabama has in these different personalities and just types of people who are now leading the program, because it just has a very different feel from when Nick Saban was running things. It's not better for worse. It's just different. And so I think it's pulling back the curtain some on some of those personalities, types of people. But Kalen DeBoer, to me, is just fascinating because he is such a different person than Nick Saban. So that's, I guess, the extent I'll go into that about what I'm working on. But I think look for some stuff like that coming out this summer.
Hey, Nick, well, we really appreciate you having on. Undefeated, please thank Nick Kelly for joining us today. Nick, thank you so